Welcome back, everybody, to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 41 called Creating a Strong Jazz Program. And we have a wonderful guest with us, John Mastroianni, today. This is one of our series of jazz podcasts that we've had. If you listen back to episode 1, Jeff and I opined about many things jazz ensemble for quite a long time. In episode 18, we had Barry Saunders talking about improvisation. Episode 25 was with Craig Skeffington. Episode 28, we had Mike Sakash, who taught us how to improvise and learn a tune. He used Summertime. And then episode 33, we had with Nick Manella, who is of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson podcast. So I'm really excited to have Jeff and John here. John, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. What an illustrious group of predecessors that you named before this event. So I'm extra humbled and honored to be here with you guys tonight.
Jeff, you're the one who introduced me to John. So could you tell the audience a little bit about why John is such a special teacher and why he should be on this podcast?
Well, if we look at everything that John's done, like he's won countless awards. He was the 2014 Connecticut Teacher of the Year, the 2021 UConn Undergraduate Faculty Mentor of the Year, a three-time Grammy-nominated teacher. He is also presently the Assistant Professor of Residence of Jazz Studies at UConn, the Associate Head of Undergraduate Studies, and he'll be also your 2023 Maine All-State Honors Jazz Band. I got to meet John many years ago in the 80s when John was student teaching. And I've had the luxury of watching John teach so many groups. I remember he first started at Bridgeport Central High School as the band director there, and he built that into a huge program. Then he went to New Canaan High School, and he did the same thing there. And then he went to Hall High School and did a fabulous job. And then he went to Canton for a short period of time before he retired from public school teaching, then to UConn. Every program that John's touched has improved dramatically, but more importantly, many of my students studied in his summer improvisational camp in Stanford for, I think it was like 20 some odd years. And every summer I sent a group of kids there, and I knew when they came back, they were a better person and a better musician because of John and the other folks that were there.
So, John, you feeling better about yourself now? Now that we
Wow,
pumped
I'll
you up?
tell you.
And Jeff has always said about you that one of the reasons you were successful, among many other things, is that you believed in a really well balanced program where there was a strong jazz program, but it didn't overtake everything else. So I know that's going to be a topic of our discussion today. Could you start with maybe some of your history? I know Jeff gave a lot of it. You don't have as much history as Jeff, but none of us have as much history as Jeff. And that was for a laugh, yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about your history, but also about your philosophy of how you decided to build those programs and start those programs and things like that?
Okay. Well, thank you, Jeff. I don't know if I can live up to that introduction, but so yeah, I've had, an interesting teaching career to say the least, but a very fruitful one. And thankfully have some good longevity in this profession. I'm a first-year teacher this year, for the 41st time. So
That's awesome.
and
That's awesome.
that's the way I approach really every year and anywhere I am. My high school band director, God rest his soul, my Mr. M, he told me before I was about to become a teacher, he said, now listen, he said, you make sure that you teach for 35 years. Don't teach the same year 35 times. So if it's one thing I learned, it's that, you kind of have to make adjustments depending on where you are. So I started out in the inner city in the high school that I went to. So talk about bizarre. So 4 years after I left, I walked into the high school, and the supervisor said, who was my high school band director, said, well, the guy who's at the high school is kind of having like a nervous breakdown. He said, would you like to be the high school band director? And of course it was, what did you just say? And I mean, I didn't really know squat about marching band as much as I should, and when you're a first year teacher, well, most of us don't realize that it's okay not to know everything. It's impossible to not know everything. So I started out, and the program had 27 kids in it. And I mean, I was their father, in some cases, their social worker, their doctor, their guardian, you name it. I mean, it was some kids who were more well off, and then some kids who were really troubled, and lived in the housing projects in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I'll tell you, to this day, they are some of the most beautiful people that I've ever met. And we had an amazing relationship, and first and foremost, I think I had to make them realize that, sure, I'm their teacher, I'm going to have high expectations like I always do, but I'm their friend, I'm going to help them, I'm going to guide them, and I'm going to teach them how to be great. Please come along with me on this journey. And they drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak. So in a town like that, if I had marching band rehearsal on Columbus Day, for instance, I was keeping them off the street. I mean, it was a much different animal, So from there, I went to New Canaan, which is one of the wealthiest communities in Connecticut. So, but that's a whole different animal in itself. It was a jock town. They're really, I mean, they built like this football field that you won't believe. And they were really intense with the whole sports thing. And I was the fourth band director in 3 years. So after I stayed there 1 year, the kids were joking and said, "Hey, Mr. M, where are you going next year?" And I said, "No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying here." And I stayed 10 years. And by the way, I was 6 years in Bridgeport, in my old hometown. But there, same thing. There were 20 something kids left in the band, right? So the assistant principal pulled me aside and said, there's three things that everyone does in New Canaan. They all play interscholastic sports. They all do Walter Schock, this big dance company, and most of them are in AP honors classes, and they're all going to go to all these. He says, if you don't mess with those things, you can have a successful program. So, I think this is a lesson too, especially for young teachers, like, sure, we all think this is the most important thing there is, like, right? Every teacher should think that about their subject. But, my ego is not as such, thank goodness, where I'm like, oh, really? Oh, forget it. I can't stand this. So I worked within the parameters of what was given to me. And 10 years later, there were almost 200 kids in the band.
Amazing.
I had a good majority of the school in the band. And you talk about adjusting to your surroundings. Jeff will especially appreciate this as a clarinetist. But so there were these two kids that they weren't on the basketball team in the band. So they said, "Mr. M, we'll get there as fast as we can." It was like a playoff game or something. And we had like our spring concert at 8 o'clock. They come running like maniacs. It's like 2 minutes to 8. And they're in their basketball uniforms and, and all that. We're like, we're so sorry. We'll go change right now. But I said, wait. No. I said, wait a minute, just stay right here. They had their clarinets, they had their music. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, I want you to walk onto the stage just like that. And I want you to get, one of them was actually the concert mistress, So I said, you give the tuning note. You give the tuning note, like dress like that. And I'll tell you, as stupid as this sounds, like I was a hero.
Yep.
It was like, now, sure, the rest of the band was dressed in tuxes, like a tux shirt and a bow tie and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but I was a hero because I let the situation, I didn't get so stuck up on myself, so to speak, where it was like, oh, I'm not even letting them on the stage, forget it, they're not dressed properly, etc. And it turned into a beautiful moment. So that was a great thing. And then, as Jeff mentioned, I went to Hall High School, which is one of the best jazz programs in the country historically, has been for many, many years. But I walked into there and I had the opposite problem. I teased at parents' night when I met the parents. I said, "This is great. I walk into this school, I got nowhere to go but down. I really have to, so right, I have to prove myself and do some good stuff here." But as you mentioned about the balance of the program, which is obviously the probably the main gist of our conversation this evening. But one of the things I tried to do at Hall was to work really, really, really hard